Hello and welcome to your next tutorial on Visual Basic, and as you can see we're starting where we left off. And in this tutorial we're going to be learning about loops. So as you can see everything's still the same, this still looks the same. Okay, so what are loops? Well basically, what if you have a piece of code that you would like to have executed multiple times? Well, you don't want to just have that code printed out again and again in here for two reasons. One, it's more work for you. And two, if you copy and paste the code again and again in here, then what will happen is the application, the file size will be larger, and eventually your application will run slower, and the user won't like that. And if worse comes to worse, they're going to want a refund, and well, that's not good. So do you have to use loops with list boxes? No, and you almost never will. I'm not quite so sure with Visual Basic has other languages which you will almost never use list boxes with them. There's plenty of ways to use loops. But I'm going to be using a list box just so it's easy for me to show you how many times a loop executes. But anyways, let's figure out how to create a loop. So let's say we want whatever you type in this inbox, what if we want this to be printed an X number of times in this list box? What we can do is, well, let's create a loop. So the first one I'm going to show you is the do while loop. So there we go, and then here inside the parentheses goes an expression. So first I'm going to have to create a variable, and you'll see why. Dim I as integer. And the reason why I call it I is because most textbooks usually introduce loops using I as an increment or decrement, either way. And so do while I is less than 10. You know what? Make it easier. I'll make it 5. Then I'll click enter, and there we go. So all the code that executes will go in between the do while and the loop itself. So let's type out, let's say, list collection dot items dot add. Whoops. Dot items dot add. And within the parentheses, we'll want to type in the this right here, input. And there we go. So I'll click save, and there we go. This should be. Oh, one more thing. I should almost forgot because that would have been bad. As you can see, I has not been initialized yet, so we need to do that. The reason why you shouldn't initialize an increment like this until you are inside the subroutine is so it goes back to 0 every time they click the button, and that's very important so that they're able to start over every time they execute this piece of code. So I will be at 0, but won't it always be 0 as it goes through here? That's true, and that is what's called an infinite loop, and basically your application will crash. So we will need to increment this variable. And you can also decrement it as well, make it I minus equals. But if you do that, make sure that this is backwards, make it I is greater than, and make sure the variable is greater. So that's, otherwise it will be infinite as well. So let's test this out, see how it works. So I'll put in hi, and there you go, hi's in there 5 times. Went through there 5 times, added the item. And that's why I kept this as clear instead of individual item removal, so you can get rid of all of them at once. So that's a lot nice. Okay, so let's use a better example. So what if we would like the powers of a certain number, let's say 5. What if we want all the exponents of 5? 5 to the 0 power, 5 to the first power, 5 to the second power, as many as we want to appear there. Well, there's a few variables we're going to have to get through. But first, let's change this to 5. And to the power of, well, since we're starting with 0, 1, 2, 3, we just want that to be I, right? Because, well, it's going to increment the way we want it, so everything will pop up nicely. And what if we want to be able to control how many times it executes? Well, we can make this a number, so we can throw an input right here, right? And basically, what we type in here will be the number of times it executes, right? Well, not quite. As I mentioned in the last tutorial, this will always be a string. Whatever you type in here will always end up being a string. And that's why input here has to be equal to string. And you can't just put C int in front of this. because option strict will disallow that. So how do we go about doing that? Well, what you can do is create a new variable. I'll call it input underscore conv as integer. And the conv is just short for conversion. You can call it whatever you'd like. And I'll initialize the variable down here. And I'll set it equal to cint and then input. So then the variable will be changed. So then this will have to be conv. And the reason why that's an integer is because you won't want, 5 to the, and this is an integer because you don't want it to be 5 to the 3.4 power. That's just weird. And you want to make sure it does not loop. That's another thing I didn't mention. Make sure this is an integer, just so no weird thing happens where it will loop 3.4 times, because that'll just mess up. So make sure the I is an integer here. And for this example, make sure, just that's an integer. So I think everything there should work. So let's try executing this. So I'll click add and type in a string. How many times do you want it to go through? Let's have it go through 3 times. And there you go, went through 3 times. 5 to the 0 power, 5 to the first power, 5 to the second power. You can click add if you want it to go 4 times instead. So it goes all the way to 5 to the third power, and you can just remove all of it. So that's really, really nice. And yeah, that's just I guess that's a decent example to show you in a non-project video on loops. So this was the first loop, and I would like to show you some other loops and some alternative forms. So the first one is the do while, and this example was what's called a pre-test. And basically what that means is it tests the expression before executing code. So basically a pretest, which is how we wrote this here, it will always evaluate the expression first before ever trying to execute this code. So what you can do is do what's called a post test. Executes code at least once. This is true. So allow me to show you the syntax for a post text. So I'll cut this and I'll paste it here basically. So it says do this. The application is not going to question that. It is going to do that code. It will. And then it'll check the expression. So even if this is false to start with, it will still execute this at least once. And as you can see here, it should execute the code just the same. So I'll throw in 5, and there you go, does it 5 times. Still works. Okay, so, well, that's it about that. So the next one I want to show you is the do until. So actually I'm going to cut this, then paste it back up here, and change this to an until. And basically the difference between a do while and a do until is do while executes code while expression is true, and the do until is not much different actually. Executes code until expression is true. Okay, I sorry, I typed that out wrong. False. There you go. And this makes sense. The do while executes code while expression, or excuse me, while it's true. Yeah, that is. Oh, see, I look, while and until I got mixed up here. So let me change this. Until the code is false, and I'll explain this in a moment, and until expression is true. Okay, so the do while loop, as you solve the do while, it'll check to see if the expression is true, and it'll keep doing it until it's false. The do until is just the opposite. It'll check to see if it's false. If it is false, then it will execute it, and it'll keep executing it until it's true. And usually the difference in the syntax is you use an equals sign. So if this is equals, then it's going to be false, right? Because when we first go through it, I will be 0, and it will not be equal to whatever we type in. Well, it could be. It could be. So allow me to execute this. And if I click add and I do it 4 times, does it 4 times? If I make it 0, it didn't do it at all, which would make sense anyways, because even if we had it 0, it still wouldn't. And you know what? Let's make it less then. Let me show you the difference in action, because it's going to be true right off the bat. So let's type in, I don't know, 5, and it was invalid. Didn't work. So that's cool. Yeah, so make sure you always have this out there. So I think that's all I wanted to show you with that. Okay, so do until also has these guys right here. So I'll cut this. Oh, whoops. Paste. Oh man. Control Z, Z, Z. There we go. Copy. I love the Control Z, and it has the very same stuff. So you can cut this and paste, and it will work just the same. And that's the post test, so we'll always do it at least once. Now there's one more type of loop I would like to show you, and that's the for next. And this has a bit of an odd syntax to it. So basically, for this one, we want to get rid of this, and then the syntax is for, and then you type out the variable I is equal to then wherever you would like it to start. So I'll put it 0, and then type in 2, whoops, and then whenever you want it to stop. So you can make it any kind of number. You know what? I'll just make it 4. I could just use our little input. You know what? I should just use our little input conv. There we go. Loop must be preceded by a matching do. Whoops. Oh, whoops. That's the little syntax. The reason why it said loop, it was saying that there was a problem with the loop here because it had to be a do up here. And then you don't put do there, you put next. And then what you do there is you type out the variable that you would like to have incremented. So if you type in I, it'll automatically increment the I for you. And what's our little error here? I'm sure that's fine. So let's run this application, and I don't know, let's do it 3 times, see how it works. And oh, whoops, we started with 0 until 3, so it did 0. So this was a little different because it started this with 0. What happened is it went in there first as 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. So the big difference is here is that a little hard for me to explain. This is like an equals sign. So it kept doing it even when it was equal to that. Since it was not a less than, it's an equals. This doesn't mean equals, but it included that last number. As opposed to before, when we did the less sign, it does not include that last one. And that's why I did it 1 additional time. So, now believe it or not, you can actually decide how many steps it increments. Before, we had, we did I plus equals 1 or something, and you could have changed it to 2 or 3 as well in those other loops. In order to do that in here, because it's not as clear, afterwards you type out step, and then how many times you want it to increment. So let's do it 2. So if I click save, and then I run the application, how many times did I do it? 4. Click 4, and now it does it 1 less time, because it did the first, so it did it when it was 0, then it did it when it was number 2, and then it did it when it was number 4. Does that make sense? Because I typed in 4, so it did it when it was 0, and then it did it when it was 2, and then it did it when it was 4. So that worked. So, yeah, and I hope that was clear for you. Because it includes when it's 0, and then, so it went in 3 times. And that's about it for this tutorial. This last one, this for loop, the for loops, in my opinion, in all programming languages, are always the bit more the tricky ones to understand. But yeah, I hope this was a useful tutorial for you. You guys already have that written down, so I'll just go down a little bit to this. And I hope this was very useful, because loops are very helpful in anything, in the real world, homework, just anything. And I'll see you next time.